Hello, this is Stormtrooper 1. In case you were just way too busy to listen to our last show, this is what you missed.
So if they were to, again, do connections like that, I think it could work. But I think it's a lot more complicated than simply she's related.
She's related.
Oh, she's my niece.
Because here's the thing.
Treat her well, Luke.
Treat her well, Luke.
This is my niece.
Leave her on a desert planet to a slave trader. It's okay.
Oh. What you don't know, she's half Tusken Raider. I got bored on Tatooine, and I fucked a Tusken Raider.
But, like...
Don't take off your clothes, Ray. Your face looks human, but your body looks like a Tusken Raider. And a little bit of Jawa as well. Actually, you know what? I also got bored one time, during a Jawa festival. Maybe she's part of Jawa. Honestly, Luke, I don't remember.
It was all a blur.
But if you take her pants down and she says, "Poo-tee-tee," she's probably a Jawa. Don't judge me, Luke. Don't judge me. I'm dead, and I'm talking to you through the Force Spirit, and I'm trying to help you out here. I don't know. I got bored. She might be part Krayt Dragon as well. Jesus, Obi-Wan, did you ever have sex with a human on Tatooine?
Warning from the Bacta Tank contains adult language and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not continue.
We would be honored if you would join us.
How are you feeling? Your latest workups on your condition indicate that all damage has been reversed. Recovery is total. I believe you have been quite fortunate. No further thanks are necessary, Commander, but you are most welcome. It is my function and pleasure as a medical droid to help and heal human beings.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Star Wars from the Bacta Tank. I am Michael Flores, your host, and I am in studio with David Sabal.
Hello.
All right, so we have a lot of things to talk about, which I'm very happy to discuss. Some recent news that has taken the Star Wars world by storm, but not just the Star Wars world, the movie world. Hollywood is up in arms, hollering and clamoring and wondering what's going on behind the scenes of Star Wars, the Han Solo standalone film. I'm happy because Chris Miller and Phil Lord are officially out as directors. What has it been, 6 months already filming?
And they're out.
And they have brought the one and only legendary director, Ron Howard, in to direct the movie.
Because when you have a problem come up, you go for the big guns. That's a big gun.
Oh, I am so happy because, as most of our listeners know, I have never been keen on the idea of Miller and Lord even directing this. I questioned the hiring from the very beginning. The guys that did 21 Jump Street and the Lego Movie. Yes, each of those movies are good in their own right. But they completely don't mesh with Star Wars.
The style.
And not only that, they're very new, inexperienced actors. They've never done anything of this magnitude. They've done a couple live-action movies and a cartoon.
And that, I think that you just hit it on the head. I think that Kathleen Kennedy and the Star Wars and Lucasfilm, they've been focusing. A lot of people have been questioning their choice of directors, but I think when you take a look at it, it's starting to make sense that they're trying to get that new blood
right
into the Star Wars franchise. So, if you look, J.J. Abrams, he's not like a brand new director or anything, but he is part of that new guard that's coming in.
Yeah.
And then,
I understand what they were trying to do by hiring Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I get it. I understand they wanted to have something different. A duo young group of directors, a young duo group of directors coming in and working together on this movie and putting some of their swagger into it, because they do have a style. They do. But these guys are used to working in the comedy field. And as you start reading the reports and you're going through all of them, whether they're pro Lucasfilm or against Lucasfilm's decision, all comes down to one thing. The vision of Han Solo was not in sync with what Kathleen Kennedy, Lucasfilm, and Lawrence Kasdan, the writer, wanted for Han Solo. It keeps coming back to this. Phil and Chris were taking it down a comedic path. Han Solo isn't an effing comedian.
Yes.
And they tried to work with him, obviously, for 6 months. And according to the reports, these problems surfaced almost immediately. As soon as they started rolling, there were problems with the idea and the fundamental characterization of Han Solo. And there's rumors that they were fighting with Lawrence Kasdan. And I'm in the middle here with who to take sides with. I mean, if someone were to say, Michael, make a choice, who Team Lucasfilm, aka Team Kathleen Kennedy and Lawrence Kasdan, or Team Chris Miller and Phil Lord, I'm choosing Lawrence Kasdan and Kathleen Kennedy every day.
Yeah.
I mean, the two people who have been involved with George Lucas, Steven Spielberg from the very conception of Star Wars and the whole era, the whole golden age of cinema of the early 80s and late 70s.
Essentially, when I started reading these articles, it became an argument. It like went beyond Star Wars, and it started becoming a argument of, are you basically the production side, like the production house? Are you the business side, or are you the independent filmmaker?
Yeah.
And that's what this argument just exploded into suddenly. And I'm like going, it amazes me that I'm like you. I try to actually be as unbiased as possible. However, nowadays, especially with a lot of like what I've read in the past with other productions, new directors nowadays, I'm sorry, it feels like they're not being taught how actual business, movie making business, is run.
Yeah, you keep seeing the same problems with these.
You keep seeing the same problems.
You keep seeing these same problems now with these newer, younger directors having problems with the studios of these big tentpole franchises, and people are acting like it's a new thing. This is nothing new. From the dawn of movies, the studios always have final cut. They always control the movie, period. You're dealing with millions and millions of dollars that's not yours. And you have to answer to your bosses. There's very few people in Hollywood to this day that has final cut. And there's 4 of them that I can say with confidence I know for a fact has final cut. It is Martin Scorsese.
Yes.
Steven Spielberg.
Definitely.
George Lucas.
Yeah.
Ron Howard.
Yeah.
And there's one more. It's slipping. James Cameron.
James Cameron, yeah.
Those are the 5 directors who have final cut. There are no other directors in the business that has final cut.
You could say like Ridley Scott is close there, but
he is
only today.
He is if he's working completely under his own banner. But as soon as he has to work for a studio to help distribute the film, then guess what? He's dealing with other people's money. And he does have, I would argue that he does, for the most part, does in fact have final cut. But I'm sure there's people that he has to that questions him. No one ever questions Spielberg, Ron Howard, or James Cameron, or Scorsese, ever. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with that one. But before we move any further into this, I want to get into an article because I don't want to just talk about our opinions. I want to read through some facts that have been released about the movie and about the rumors going on set. And then we're going to go from there and we're going to talk about it, break it down, and then express our own opinions on these facts. Okay.
Yeah.
So
otherwise we'll be all over the place.
Right. According to this article, new details emerged from the set of the troubled Han Solo movie. An editor was fired, a last-minute acting coach hired, as insiders debate whether problems traced to directors Phil Lord and Chris Miller, or if Disney and Lucasfilm series can accommodate divergent styles. First off, it can accommodate divergent styles, but it can't accommodate you trying to force your creative will over the powers of Lucasfilm and the Lucasfilm Story Group. The Lucasfilm Story Group will always gain the upper hand over you because they know the complete story of the entire universe of Star Wars that they're trying to tell. Yes. This is an undertaking. You have to remember books, comics, movies, TV shows, video games, all are telling one story that's all connected by way of canon.
It's a franchise.
So you have to understand, if they're asking you to do a specific thing, they're not being anal. They're saying, listen, we have a larger story we're telling. You need to make sure you listen to what we're trying to tell you.
Yes.
Now, matters had already reached a boiling point in mid-June when Phil Lord and Chris Miller, co-directors of the still untitled young Han Solo movie, where they were sitting in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, but didn't start shooting until 1 p.m. when they were starting as early as 7 or 8 in the morning. That day, they used only 3 different setups. And for those of you that aren't aware, basically it's 3 variations on a camera placement.
Yes.
When they were supposed to, according to Kathleen Kennedy, were supposed to get 12 to 15 setups. Now, talking as a filmmaker, David, you and I both.
Yes.
2 to 3 setups is nothing.
That is
nothing. And you're wasting you wasted millions of dollars. Every day that you're not shooting what you're supposed to shoot, if you're supposed to shoot, let's say 3 pages a day, and you shot 1, and then not only did you just shoot 1 page, but you only shot 2 to 3 setups on that 1 page, you just wasted millions of dollars.
Yeah. When I first heard this and I looked further deep into it, this is a very independent filmmaker, small way of like micro budgeting. But that doesn't work in a big giant production like when you're dealing with $1 million budget.
Yeah, and 2 to 3 setups. And the reason why it's important to get 12 to 15 is because you have to have options in the editing bay.
Yeah.
You have to have options. Sometimes, let's say the eye line was messed up on one of the actors, or someone scratched their hair in one shot, and then it messed up their hair, and their hair laid an opposite direction. And then in the next shot, it doesn't look like that, and it messes up continuity. And when you only have 2 or 3 setups and a few takes on each, you're going to have massive issues when you go to edit. Yeah. So there's a specific reason why the studio or Lucasfilm, aka Kathleen Kennedy, is asking for more setups. They have to have those choices in editing because it can destroy a movie and cause you to go out and do massive reshoots when the movie was supposed to have wrapped.
Yeah,
shooting.
And there's a lot of when I went to a forum board to see what about more information on this article, there was a filmmaker who was like saying, well, in all honesty, Phil Lord and all of them possibly were trying to save the studio money. And I'm like going, no, that's not how it works. You're not supposed to save them money.
No, they budgeted this. You're not going to save them money. They already budgeted the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to. You just do what they ask. Now, this is hardly the first time, according to this report, Kennedy was unhappy with how the film was progressing, not just in terms of shots, but also the slow nature of their shooting process. They were very slow on set. They weren't accommodating the lengthy, aggressive schedule that they needed to keep in order to get this movie out in the right time. As Lawrence Kasdan looked at the dailies from his home in Los Angeles, which is the writer of Han Solo, but let's put a little bit more of a spotlight on who Lawrence Kasdan is so people understand who he is. He's the man who arguably wrote the best Star Wars movie ever, which is Empire Strikes Back. He also wrote Return of the Jedi. He also worked on Force Awakens with J.J. Abrams. This guy knows Star Wars. Yeah. He understands. I mean, just to add more oomph to his credibility, Empire Strikes Back is really the movie where we got to know Han Solo.
Yes.
And where his personality really started shining and coming through. That was Lawrence Kasdan.
Yeah.
He understands Han Solo. Don't argue with the guy who basically co-created a character with George Lucas.
Yes.
So he was unhappy. The screenwriter, Lawrence Kasdan, and executive producer was very displeased. He was upset with the constant changing of the script. Lord and Miller, the successful team behind Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street, were chafing too. According to sources close to them, there were deep, fundamental philosophical differences in filmmaking styles, this person says, and the directors felt they were being given zero creative freedom. They also felt they were being asked to operate under extreme scheduling constraints and were never given enough days for each scene from the very beginning. You know what? I don't feel sorry for them.
I don't.
I don't feel sorry for them because they should have known what this was going to be about. They should have known. The creative freedom, I understand as being a creative individual myself. I understand there's going to be creative differences and there's going to be some bumping of heads and you have to argue a bit and you have to fight. And I would respect that if they were to argue and stand their ground a bit, if they felt very strongly about something, but not to the point where they're slowing up production, costing the company millions of dollars, and then changing the script on the fly, which is the next big problem. There was a lot of improv going on during the set and the filming, which, again, this is where you can blame Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy for hiring this duo.
Because it just sounds that they were inexperienced. Not
only inexperienced, but improvisation is very popular and very, it's a thing when you're directing comedies. It happens a lot. That's why a lot of these those comedy movies will have those behind the scenes cuts and you see them doing a bunch of crazy things that never happened in the movie. It's because you're improvising. It wasn't written in the script. The nature of comedy is designed where improv can work, especially because typically if you're working in a comedy film, you're not just basing your performance as a thespian. You're not harnessing your thespian skills. You're harnessing your comedic ability, which is very different than a trained actor. Typically with these comedy movies where you improv a lot, you have trained comedians, trained actor/comedians who understand comedic timing and who work better under the nature of improvisation. So Chris Miller and Phil Lord were utilizing a tactic that they've done on all their movies, and it's worked great because of the nature of the movie. 21 Jump Street was a comedy. The Lego Movie was a cartoon and a comedy. Han Solo, where you're dealing with actors who aren't comedians by design, if you look at Aldrin Enright, he's not a comedic actor. He's an actor. And to ask them to improvise on the fly is very difficult. And I have worked with actors a lot. And I can tell you firsthand that they don't like to improvise. It's very difficult for an actor to just improvise when it's not that type of movie.
Actors just like structure.
They like structure. They need to be told what to do by way of a blueprint, which is the screenplay. And if you have rehearsed a screenplay, you know what's going to go on, you know how you're going to play it, you know where your marks are, you know the camera blocking, and then suddenly the directors are telling you to improvise. Not only does that throw off the actor, but it also throws off the camera blocking and everything associated with that scene. Because with a movie like this, you have a cinematographer specifically marking points where the camera has to move. You have visual effects guys who have things already planned. You have the gaffer already setting up the light. And when you improvise, you're throwing a lot of these things off. You can't do it in a big, giant film like this. And unfortunately, Chris Miller and Phil Lord couldn't understand that. And that is why, ultimately, they got fired.
Now, just to actually interject this bit of information, you basically mentioned that you can't do this on big budget films like this. And a lot of people are saying, well, it worked for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Did they improvise?
Yeah. Now here's the thing, though. It worked because Guardians is supposed to be comedic.
Right.
If we're not...
And also, who's the lead in that?
Chris Pratt.
Who's what? He's from the comedy field. And then you have James Gunn, who makes slapstick comedy movies. I mean, it works.
It works.
And then you have everything is slapstick in Guardians of the Galaxy.
And then the thing is, you guys got to understand that Han Solo, Star Wars, is not Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not going to be, it can't be like that. That's not the tone of Star Wars.
And not only that, if they were trying to take Han Solo down a comedic path, that's not Han Solo.
Yeah, it's not Han Solo.
And to be fair to Phil and Chris as well, this is an undertaking. Unlike Gareth Edwards with Rogue One, unlike J.J. Abrams with Force Awakens, they weren't asked. They were asked to take an iconic character, recast them, and make it feel like Han Solo. That's hard. So to be fair to them, that's an undertaking. But they also knew the assignment and they understood how hard it was going to be. They can't get on set and try to do their own thing and change who Han Solo is, and then not listen to the feedback by the creators, Lawrence Kasdan, and the bosses of, Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy. You can't do that. And this is nothing new. As I said, we shouldn't get worried about this. This isn't anything new.
No.
I feel like this movie is going to be just fine, especially because of the hiring of Ron Howard. Bringing Ron Howard on was a great get. I guarantee you that Kathleen Kennedy had already contacted Ron Howard years ago. Back when this whole thing started, I guarantee you she had a conversation with him and said, hey, in the future, if we need you in a pinch, are you willing to come on board and save the day? Because Ron Howard isn't just some director that she had on speed dial. No, I'm saying actually that is what he probably was. He's not just some director who she pulled out of a hat. This is a long relationship that they've had. They are from the same, they all came up together. George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Ron Howard, Kathleen Kennedy, James Cameron, they all came up together around the exact same time period and all have worked together at some point.
Yes.
Ron Howard is an old friend of Kathleen Kennedy. I guarantee you she already planned on utilizing him in case, if not for his own movie, but if not for that, then to come in and save the day and direct a movie. Because, I mean, it was announced literally overnight. There was rumors saying that they were talking to other people, but after he was hired, Kathleen Kennedy came out and said there was no other people they were talking to. They only spoke to Ron Howard.
Yes.
So I'm happy. I'm okay with it. It does create a lot of questions, but I think we can point to Rogue One as an example that everything will be fine. There were problems with Rogue One. If you remember, Tony Gilroy was brought in to do, what was it, like 50 or 60% reshoots?
40 to 50.
It was 40 to 50% reshoots for Rogue One. Half of the movie that Gareth Edwards directed was redone. But the reason why he didn't make all these overblown headlines was because Gareth Edwards understood what he got into. He understood that this movie and this franchise is bigger than him, and he respectfully bowed and said, all right, I understand.
And because of that, the relationship of Edwards to Rogue One wasn't as strained as it is with these two and the Han Solo film, because he did it out of cooperation. And when Tony Gilroy took over, Gareth Edwards was still there in case Gilroy needed help.
Yeah. But you remember, Gilroy was the one in the editing room. And when they went to editing, he was the one making all the decisions. Gilroy, not Gareth Edwards. So this, if anything, this has given me a lot more respect for Gareth Edwards, who I wasn't a big fan of Rogue. I mean, I liked Rogue One, but I wasn't a big fan of his work. But if anything, I'm more of a fan of his because of the fact that he realizes that Star Wars is much bigger than his ego. And also because he handled this like a gentleman, his name is now synonymous with Rogue One, not Tony Gilroy.
Yes.
It's Gareth Edwards. He's the one who was able to take the accolades and the credit for all the work that he did, in fact, do on the set. Unlike what's going to happen with Chris Miller and Phil Lord, their career will suffer from this. They were directly being insubordinate to a major studio. You don't do that if you hope to have a career. Their careers are going to suffer.
I honestly think so, because this is like the Josh Trank moment.
Yeah, where's Josh Trank?
And
What's
where's
he
Josh
doing?
Trank now?
Yeah, Josh Trank had a meltdown. Had a complete meltdown. And look, I am sympathetic. It is a major undertaking. It's a major undertaking, and anybody could easily have a breakdown and start to feel overwhelmed. But that's where Kathleen Kennedy and your power team comes in and say, hey, we're here to help. This is what you need to do. One of the biggest rumors as well, allegedly happening behind the scenes of Han Solo film, which also created a lot of a lot of worry amongst the fandom, is that there seems to be a problem that Lucasfilm has a very serious problem with Aldrin Ehrenreich's performance as Han Solo, meaning they're not happy. There was a coach being hired, an acting coach being brought on to work with him.
That blew my mind when I read that.
It made me nervous for a moment, but then I took a step back and I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, this rumor came out around the same time as the firing of Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And honestly, if Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, was having a problem with his performance, it has less to do with him as an actor in retrospect and more to do with the directors.
Absolutely.
And I honestly think that they were unhappy with his performance, not because of his acting abilities, it's because they probably weren't privy to exactly what Phil Lord and Chris Miller were doing as they were sending dailies over to Kathleen Kennedy and Lawrence Kasdan. And then they're like, wow, I don't really like this guy. He really doesn't get it. And then they find out they're not listening. The directors aren't listening to our script notes and our notes. And I think that's ultimately why they fired them. At this point, they're going to be reshooting probably most of the movie.
Yes.
So if the real problem was Aldrin Enreich, you know what they would be doing right now? They'd be also recasting and starting over.
Yeah.
Because according to the rumors, Ron Howard is pretty much redoing the entire movie.
Yeah, that's amazing in itself. That basically Ron Howard's. I have no question that I believe Ron Howard can pull it off, but they've already been at this for 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months.
That means he's 6 months behind.
Yeah, and according to a recent report that got tweeted out to me by one of our listeners, I apologize for not remembering your name. I apologize, but Ron Howard, Kathleen Kennedy, Lawrence Kasdan, and the other entourage of powers at Lucasfilm will be sitting down for the next 2 weeks, reviewing all of the footage from Han Solo, and they're going to try to figure out what they can use. But it doesn't look good, meaning it looks like they're going to be doing a lot of reshoots. I wouldn't be surprised, as I was saying, if they're going to end up doing a complete 75-80% reshooting. Exterior shots they can probably stick with, but anything dealing with performances of actors, I guarantee you those will be reshot, because that's where the problem lies, with the actual directing with those actors.
Yeah, and I honestly think that this is going to be a complete test for Alden Ehrenreich, because he's going to be working with Ron Howard, and Ron Howard is one of the, by all reports, Ron Howard's one of the most workable directors out there. He's an actor's director.
Yeah. Did you already hear what's happening on set? Allegedly, all the actors are beyond excited.
Be working with Ron Howard.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't be?
Who wouldn't be?
I mean, if you're Aldreich, yes, you're probably happy that you're cast as Han Solo, but you're working with Phil and Chris Miller, and yes, I'm not taking away from them. But when you're in Star Wars, you kind of get that enthusiasm, like, oh man, I'm going to be working with George Lucas, or I'm going to be working with this big name director. And these guys aren't big names. Now all of a sudden, you're like, holy shit, Ron Howard's coming here. That's a big deal. And I can definitely see actors getting excited for working with a guy who's an Oscar-winning director, who's made fantastic movies and who always makes his actors shine.
Yeah, who honestly is one of the biggest names in the studio, in the studio atmosphere too, because that has to bringing it. I like the fact that Kathleen Kennedy brought in Ron Howard, because that really brings that air of how serious this is, that they want to get Han Solo right.
Yeah,
that they went out. And ever since the beginning, we've always been wondering, well, why don't big name directors take a Star Wars film? Right. Why doesn't Quentin Tarantino?
JJ was the first big name that actually took it on.
Yeah,
and I believe that the only reason why he took that role, or took the role of the director for that, was because he was the first one. If he was brought on for the third or a standalone movie, I think you would see him being more hesitant, because JJ had the privilege of setting the tone of the new Star Wars chapter. A lot of these ideas were from him. The trilogy, for the most part, is his brainchild. Even though he's not directing episode 8 and episode 9, he wrote the treatment. He wrote the story. He laid it out. So he had the benefit and the privilege to do that. But I don't think a director like JJ would be as welcoming to take one of these movies later in the game, because he wouldn't have the control that he had. He wouldn't have that creative freedom. He would be confined, much like the rest of these directors were. But overall, just to kind of wrap this whole story on Han Solo and Ron Howard, I feel like we're in a good place. Like, despite these problems, I'm glad we got these problems out of the way and put the people in place to fix the movie. And again, if we didn't have the success of Rogue One, I would be worrying. But we have evidence and proof to show you that Lucasfilm knows what they're doing. Kathleen Kennedy knows what she wants to do in Star Wars. Look what they did with Rogue One, which I don't think it is, but many people feel like it's the best Star Wars installment since Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
I don't think it is.
I don't either, but it's good.
But a lot of, I love it. But I'm just saying, a lot of people feel like it's one of the best Star Wars movies ever made. And this is a movie that was also plagued by a lot of problems. And Kathleen Kennedy came in, got it fixed, and look what we got. So I feel confident. My confidence is not shaken up at all with this. If anything, I am more giddy and more excited now because of Ron Howard's involvement.
Yeah.
Because as everyone knows that who listens to our shows, I have not been an avid. I always say I'm excited because it's Star Wars, but I always keep saying, how many times have I said, I don't really care about the Han Solo spinoff?
Yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with probably the fact that the directors, I just was never really keen on them.
Yeah.
So this is a win for me as a Star Wars fan. I'm glad.
Because this tickles your fancy when it comes to actually being a filmmaker, because the name Ron Howard basically
we went to film school because the directors like him.
Exactly. And that's what I mean is like, that's why it, for me right now, I am now building up hype for the Han Solo film, because I'm like going, Ron Howard's behind this now. Can he be Superman and save the day?
Yeah, dude. God, I'm so like excited.
Of course he is. It's freaking Ron Howard. It's one of the directors, classical directors that us as filmmakers, we base our stuff on.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, kind of segueing over to something a little different. Colin Trevorrow asked Rian Johnson to add a scene to Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is nothing new. Rian Johnson also had asked J.J. Abrams to add some scenes in order for him to accommodate the next chapter that he would be directing. The article says, not that long ago, we learned that Rian Johnson asked JJ to make an adjustment to Star Wars The Force Awakens during the filming in order to suit the story he was developing for Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now we've learned that Star Wars Episode 9 director Colin Trevorrow similarly asked for a tweak from Johnson in the form of a new scene that could set up a plot point for the final chapter in the sequel trilogy. Now, this is a perfect example, and the reason why I even have this in here is because this is a perfect example of the collaborative nature of the Star Wars franchise.
Yes.
You have three directors working together, making changes. Three egos. Okay, three egos working together to accommodate each other's stories. No problems, no issues, and it's funny that we don't hear about problems from this set.
Yeah.
We haven't heard nothing. There's been not one problem, because I think ultimately Kathleen Kennedy spent a long time really focusing on who's going to direct these movies, and she picked personalities along with JJ, because JJ had a say, and the directors. And because of that, you have a team of three directors working together to make this one story very cohesive. And I think from the very start, they understood that it wasn't their story. It wasn't my story. It was our story.
Yes.
And I think this is a perfect example of the synergy between directors, producers, and Lucasfilm, and how it's going to have to be moving forward. And I honestly think, David, there are going to be directors who can't take it. You're going to have the Phil Lords. You're going to have the Joshua Tranks. You're going to have these directors who can't get behind the idea that this isn't theirs. This isn't the days of one and done movies. This is my movie. We're dealing with tentpole franchises that are telling ongoing, cohesive stories that are all interrelated and connected.
Exactly.
And what I think you're going to start seeing within the next 5 to 6 years, if not sooner, you're going to start seeing television directors being utilized a lot more than the go-to film directors for these types of movies. And you know why, David? Because TV directing is very different than a film director by nature. TV directors for years already know the business. A TV director has creative say in a lot of things, but when it comes down to it, the writers and the television producer has the final say in the entire story.
Yes.
They're the ones who are writing the story. They're the ones who are handling things day in and day out. The directors come in, direct the scene, they work with the actors, and they're done. So they understand the collaborative nature of the television business, where you come in and you direct maybe 3 or 4 episodes of the season and you're done. And you're not there to make these drastic changes, and you're not there to change the characterization of an ongoing set character. You're there to work your expertise and utilize the skills that they hired you to bring onto the set, your style, because they needed it for whatever reason. And I think you're going to see that, because now that the movie business has really gone in that direction with the ongoing franchises, with these big cohesive storylines, in a lot of ways, they're a lot less like movies and more like TV episodes, telling one big story. If you look at Marvel, every movie is more like an episode of television now. And the same thing's going to be happening with Star Wars. Now that we're approaching, 6 movies by the end of 2020, this is now heading into the episodic idea. This is more turning into an episodic thing rather than just a chapter or an installment into a movie franchise.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see that transition, because there's going to be those filmmakers who just don't understand. They don't get it, that they can't stick their feet in the ground and refuse to budge.
Yeah. And you got to remember, I mean, look who's leading this too. I mean, J.J. Abrams, he has a very, very extensive background in television. So this new way,
that's a perfect example. You're right.
This way of thinking of,
it's a thought process.
A thought process. Look who's starting it. It's JJ.
Yeah.
And JJ knows how television works. Yeah. I think that's why you're right. It's a new movement. It's a new movement in directing that I've always felt that basically is starting to happen.
Yeah, it's a mindset.
Because the old school way is going away. The old school way of the one and done.
At least for these big franchises, for sure.
Yeah.
At least for these big franchises. And it is definitely a mindset. And if you can't get your mind wrapped around that, then don't do these movies. Don't do these movies. And if these...
Do your own movie. That's what's becoming, because like when I look at like the Josh Tranks and the Phil Lords and everything else, they're very independent, old school independent filmmakers. And while that works, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that they're terrible directors.
No.
It's a mindset.
Right, exactly.
And that mindset does not work in the big production house system anymore.
It doesn't. And at least, again, and not for these cohesive, large scale stories, ongoing stories. So I think you're going to see a change. I think you're going to see studios looking more at capable television directors who are able to understand this bulk episodic storytelling and directing.
I think we have been seeing it. It's just not been upfront in our face as it is nowadays, especially with like a lot of the reports from the Hollywood Reporter, how some directors just fall out of favor in the production house. If you take a look, Star Wars isn't the only one. I mean, if you look at Marvel, look who heads Marvel.
Right.
Basically, they have that television mindset or that television background that basically allows them to do episodic storytelling.
Right. Exactly. And this does create a lot of problems in terms of who gets credit with these shuffling around of powers and directors and writers being fired. Because the DGA, the Directors Guild of America, is very unhappy with the new idea that it's easy to just fire a director when a studio is unhappy. Back in the day, the unions would step in and say, hey, you can't fire the director because you signed a contract. Now you're seeing these contracts changing drastically to where a studio can fire a director at any point. And the DGA is a little unhappy with that because it comes down to credit. DGA is there not just to protect you and your pay, but also to protect credit. In fact, a lot of their work has to do with credit, meaning who's on the title sequence there. And it's been in question for a long time. Do you just erase the person's name because they're fired? No, you usually give them some credit. You have to. That's why sometimes you'll have like 17 writers on a movie. It's because, let's say the movie started being shot 10 years ago and it was in developmental hell for 10 years and there was different writers coming on board. Guess what? You have to give every single one of them credit, even if their movie, their vision isn't even represented at all in the final picture. They get the credit. So there's been a lot of debate or speculation as to what's going to happen with this movie with Han Solo, specifically because we know that Ron Howard's coming on. Is he going to not get a directing credit? Will it still be credited to Phil Lord and Chris Miller? Because look at Rogue One.
Yeah.
Rogue One, Gareth Edwards didn't direct a lot of it. In the end, a lot of scenes were directed by Tony Gilroy, and he did not have any directing credit. So what's going to happen? Are we going to see people's names being erased, maybe giving them an executive producer credit and giving the actual directing job over to Ron Howard? Who knows? But it is a new time, and it has scared a lot of members of the DGA because they don't like that studios are doing this. They're unhappy with their power of being able to fire a director if they're unhappy. But again, going back to the very fundamental filmmaking 101, the first thing I learned in my production class to be a line producer like 10 years ago, and a line producer is basically the guy who puts together the entire movie. He's the one who does the budget, he does the hiring, he doesn't do the casting necessarily, but he hires the casting director, he does everything. He makes the movie possible, he puts all the moving places where they need, he puts all the moving parts in their places, and then the movie's taken over by the director, basically. And the first thing you learn about being a line producer is film insurance, and it's called a film bond. And that film bond is there to guarantee that a movie will get made if you need to fire a director. So it's always been a part of the movie business. If a studio is unhappy with the performance of a director, there's an actual insurance, name a film bond. There's actual insurance for this where, hey, we don't like these directors. They're going really slow. They're costing the studio thousands and millions of dollars. Guess what happens? The insurance company comes in, fires director, and they hire the director that's capable. So this is nothing new. It's always been there. It's just becoming more prevalent because we're dealing with these big movies.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that up because beforehand, I found an article that the Hollywood Reporter, I sent it to you and we added it to the notes that specifically talks about how there are people out there, especially like a lot of film historians now, feel that we're at a point in filmmaking history now where we're seeing the death of the director type or the director job. And at the Hollywood Reporter, they wrote an article called "A Star Wars Firing and the Death of the Director," and in it basically talks about how this latest story about Phil Lord and Phil Lord and Chris Miller, and how they were essentially, like what you said, fired from their jobs as director. It's a scary precedent that basically is saying that it's the end of the director as we know it, because there's no more, big name directors. Everything's going to be run by the studios. The studio is going to be the director at this point.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't agree with that at all. Nothing has changed. This is, like I said, this isn't new. I understand, this is a hot button topic right now because of what happened. This is a major shakeup in the world of the movie business. So I understand that people are claiming the sky's falling, but this is nothing new. Studios have always been in charge. And this is a business, David. This is a business, all right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, when you're, and I said this to you off air, it's just like when you're a CEO of Microsoft. Okay, let's say you're the CEO of Microsoft. You're the big guy. You're calling the shots. You're making the big dough. You're making the money. But guess what? Who do you answer to? You answer to the board.
Yep.
You answer to the board directors. And if you make a bad decision that hurts the company or the product, guess what happens? You get fired. It's a business. This isn't a walk in the park. If you want to do art, go paint a fucking picture.
Yeah.
If you want to express your artistic freedom, go do an indie film.
Go do an indie film. Yeah.
This isn't that. We shouldn't have these articles, especially if the Hollywood Reporter pisses me off. They do these articles as if they don't understand the movie business. You guys are the Hollywood Reporter. You understand the movie business. Why are you pretending you don't? Just for clicks? Oh, this is the end of the director, and the producers are going to start taking the studios. Are going to be the directors. The Jedis are taking over.
This is how it all ends.
And listen, I'm against the corporations. Like, I'm not that guy. You know, I do like to fight the cause, but this isn't one of them. This is a multi-billion-dollar franchise.
And this has been going on for a very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have pointed out there's points in film history where basically some of the biggest name directors were also afraid during that time being taken off of their big productions. Like in the article down the Hollywood Reporter, they actually brought up the fact that back in the day, Francis Ford Coppola was actually worried he was going to be taken off The Godfather at one point because the executives were very hesitant about his direction, but they decided against it. They said, let's go ahead and follow let's follow Coppola's method and basically let's see how it turns out. So for people saying that the sky is falling, the sky has always been falling.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we're in a good spot right now. If this was 3 years ago, I would be worried. But we have nothing but good things to point to.
Yes.
Kathleen Kennedy has been making all the right decisions. Ron Howard is now going to be officially brought on board the Star Wars family. I think things are brighter than ever for Star Wars. I am super excited to see what happens. I am super stoked for the Han Solo movie now. Everything's good, I think, in the world of Star Wars. It sucks for Phil Lord and Chris Miller, but guess what, dude? You guys decided to take you guys didn't take the high road, and you got yourself fired.
Yeah.
And you know what? If that's what they wanted because they didn't want this movie not to be theirs, then that's fine. But you wasted 6 months.
That's the thing that hurts, too. That's why I said I'd be really worried about who they brought in. But the fact that they brought in Ron Howard, I'm like going, he's Superman when it comes to directors.
Yeah.
6 months, 6 month delay. I think he can make up for it.
Yeah, and it's just it's sad kind of, you know, in retrospect, because these guys were known Star Wars fans. They put a bunch of cool little Star Wars references in the Lego movie. They even had the Millennium Falcon and Lando, and Billy D. Williams played the voice of the Lego character in the Lego movie. It was fun. They were Star Wars fans. And now, because they couldn't get over their own ego, guess what? Star Wars is forever tainted to them. Can you imagine if that happened to us? We are huge Star Wars fans. And then we got fired by Lucasfilm.
Oh,
my life would be over.
I couldn't show my face again.
Yeah, I would be so humiliated and embarrassed and upset that I ruined Star Wars for myself. Instead of just listening and saying, yeah, you know what, Lawrence Kasdan, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I totally get that.
I totally get that.
They ruined it for themselves. And that's why I don't feel sorry for them. I do not feel sorry for him. Just like I didn't feel sorry for Josh Trank losing himself on the set of Fantastic Four so much that the producer for the other untitled standalone film did not want him on board the movie, saying he is a complete loose cannon who hides himself behind the video village and tucks away the camera so no one can see the monitor, no one can see the footage. I mean, you can't do that. Can I see the dailies? No.
Nope.
These dailies are mine. These are my dailies. Quit judging me. Like these people. You imagine George Lucas ever doing that? Stay away from me, everybody.
Only nowadays, like with a lot of people saying how.
Yeah, maybe nowadays,
but back in the day, that's the funnier part is the fact that
I love Jar Jar. What are you guys talking about?
He was supposed to be my Christ-like figure.
So stupid. But he was supposed to be the chosen one.
I think that's the funny part when you take a look at film history, dude. Look at all the big names. They started as independent filmmakers and then they became production studio directors. And nowadays, it's like the independent filmmakers don't want to embrace that part of the job.
They don't want to. Unfortunately, they don't want to. It's like they don't want to pay their dues. Like Spielberg and James Cameron, except maybe George Lucas is the only one that can say he didn't have to pay his dues because that guy just straight went into making Star Wars.
Star Wars, and that was it.
But he did have someone to answer to, though, in New Hope, and he wasn't the name he is now. I gotta say he didn't have complete say in those movies. They're for obvious reasons, but I mean, James Cameron worked on terrible horror films. Steven Spielberg did a horror film. There's things that they had to do to get to where they were at. They had to prove themselves to being the directors they are today before they could call those shots.
Yeah.
Kathleen Kennedy has been working in the business since the late 70s, early 80s, before she even became this type of leader. I mean, if I was Kathleen Kennedy, I'd be looking at Phil Lord as pieces of shit. And Chris Miller, like, you fucks.
What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. I was doing this when you were just in your father's nutsack. Like, you're questioning me? I'd drop my pussy on him. Seriously, though. Like, how do you... I know we're just going on, but I don't care. I don't care if we're rambling.
Yeah.
I don't care if we're ranting this show.
This is our rant show because it's touching on the very sensitive subject between me and you, which is it's Star Wars, yes, but it's filmmaking. Filmmaking is an art to both of us, because like if there's one passion between me and Mike that we both share, it's the process of filmmaking. And when we see stories like this, it drives me up the wall. Because
can you imagine, like,
I want to pull my hair out. Remember when the whole Josh Trank thing happened? I wanted to pull my hair out. Like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
You know what? Let's bring this closer to home, Dave. You and I worked on a web series called Western X.
Yeah.
And you directed episodes.
Yeah.
I wrote it. It was mine.
Yeah.
Did you ever say, no, I'm going to do this?
No.
There were times where I said, David, I don't know if this is a great shot. Let's change things up. I didn't interfere. I let you direct the actors on your own.
Exactly.
I didn't interfere, but when I saw things that didn't quite work with what I had in mind, because I was also editing the movie,
yeah,
I was like, yeah, I went and talked to you. And did you say, no?
Yeah.
No, this is mine. This is mine. It's all mine. I'm the director. No, you said, oh, okay, I totally get it. And
unfortunately, a lot of I work with film students. And a lot of film students do not get this hammered in their head enough that basically being a director is about cooperation. Part of it is cooperation. Yeah, you're telling your freaking story, but at the end of the day, you are cooperating with your crew. That includes your executive producer, your producer. You answer to him. If you can't do that, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, the stories of, like, Josh Trank, Phil Lord, and Miller and Lord, I want to pull my hair out because I'm like going, you know what? Why can't you guys take a page from Gareth Edwards?
Yeah, dude, they're Josh Trank, Phil Lord, Chris Miller, you're going to find them in about 3 years sucking dick in the alley. Like, they have no career. Dude, I'm telling you right now. They may have a career if they want to do their own independent films. They're done, dude.
I honestly think, yeah.
They're done. Josh Trank has not recovered still from the disaster of Fantastic Four and the horrible bridges he burned when he got fired before he even got... No, he did get fired from the standalone Star Wars film.
Yeah. He didn't just burn those bridges. He napalmed them.
Yeah.
And
they're going to be in the same alley with Jar Jar. Misa sucking dick today. You guys got to help? Misa been banished. Oh, okay then. I suck dick for Imperial credits. So stupid. We need to end the show. This is the worst show we've ever done, I think. Anyways, all right. So, Dave, patreon.com/RainManDigital. We are now doing Patreon exclusive shows where we break down, I want to say, ancillary elements of the Star Wars universe. Typically, the regular show, Dave, we talk about news and this type of stuff, as we just went through. And we also, of course, have the Star Wars Rebels edition that we do. But now on Patreon, we figured we'd start doing bonus shows it's under the podcast tier, which I believe is $5 a month. So for $5 a month, you're going to get a slew of content, behind the scenes video, pre-shows that we do when the mics are off, air quotes, that we release. Also, of course, the big thing for the Star Wars listeners for Bacta Tank is we are doing additional breakdowns of books and comics. Currently, right now, what we're doing is a complete breakdown of the Screaming Citadel Star Wars crossover event between Star Wars comic and the Dr. Aphra comic, which is a fantastic series so far. Yeah. We've done 4 parts already. They're currently available on Patreon, $5 a month. We have the 5th one coming out this week via Patreon. And then I think for the month of July, what we're going to focus on for the ancillary show, for the Patreon exclusive show, we're going to be focusing on the Thrawn novel that had came out about 2 months ago.
Yes.
So we're going to be reading that. And then when we're done reading it, sometime in July, we'll have a complete breakdown. And it's not going to be a book review. We don't do, this isn't Oprah's reading group. We're going to sit down and we're going to do like we did for the, what's the book that we did? The Rogue One prequel book. I forgot what it's called now. The Rogue One prequel book, where we're actually going to sit down and break it down like we would a movie. We're going to talk about the ins and outs, the mythology that might have been explored in terms of Star Wars, the expanded universe elements, what things may mean for the larger story in terms of movies, foreshadowing, stuff like that. It's fun. We have a good time doing it. I know the listeners who have listened are enjoying what we do. So head over to patreon.com/RainmanDigital and subscribe. $5 a month. It helps us. That's why we're doing it. We're doing it because we do so much free content. We figured, hey, we need to make a little bit more money than what we're making on ad revenue. And this helps us out. And in return, we're giving you guys more content.
And I don't want to be kneeling next to Jar Jar.
Yeah. Lisa, you sure, David? You sure? I'm almost done with Phil. I'm almost done. So stupid. All right. Lisa back. All right. We got to go. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. May the force be with us.
Hello, this is Stormtrooper 1, and if you've missed any portion of the show, you can always head over to FromTheBactaTank.com and listen to the show at your leisure. We're also on Stitcher, Smart Radio, Stitcher.com, search Bacta, and add us to your favorites. Thank you. And listen responsibly. And may the force be with you. And long live. Thank you for listening to From the Bacta Tank. And From the Bacta Tank is executive produced by Michael Flores and Dustin Lucas. Hosted by Michael Flores, David Zabal. You can find out more about our show by going to www.fromthebactatank.com. You can also find us on Twitter at FromBactaTank, as well as Facebook, facebook.com/FromTheBactaTank. Thank you.